Shall I come to this mic when I do the... I'll put my hand on the piano at least so I can... Of course, I want the piano on the other side so I can... I like holding my music with my right hand. I'm right-handed, you know, but I'll figure it out. All of a sudden I realized that I was doing this. You heard me earlier. I was doing this without a mic. And I realized
Good morning. Is there anyone here who yearns for life? Is there anyone here who desires to see good days? Listen carefully with the ear of your heart. Welcome what you hear and faithfully put it into practice.
Please join in the gathering hymn, 567, verses 1 through 4.
Stars and remain standing. Let's just take a moment to notice that we're in this space together and that we get now to offer one another a sign of peace, to enter into our blessing of peace. We are invited to live into the light of God's shalom, to seek the well-being and the wholeness of all creation. Peace for our bodies, peace for our souls, peace in our relationships, peace in our world. And so I invite you, let us offer one another a sign of Christ's blessing and peace. We can circle around if we would like to, and bow, hold our hands, and in blessing. Peace be with you. There you are. Peace be with you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to those who are watching online and those who are here among us. We're glad to be here this morning, and you all get kudos for being here, setting your clocks forward, and the possibility of rain. You are troopers, and we commend you for that. Yeah. And those of you at home, don't feel bad. We're not trying to make you feel bad. I, myself, sort of overslept. So thank you, Tina. So anyway, it is a weird thing about how that happens, right? Because anyway, I'll say more about that because it just weaves in perfectly with today. I don't think we have any new visitors, so I won't mention that. But we do have a couple of announcements today. Many of you know that we have been praying for Elena. Her surgery is coming up on the 15th, and so we're going to have a big card downstairs for us to sign. So please consider that, as well as going down to Fellowship for food. The other thing happening at Fellowship, along with signing Elena's card, is that the National Farm Workers, what we're hoping to do is send some supportive messages to Florida farm workers. This Tuesday, farm workers with the coalition of, I'm not going to say it right. Thank you. Immokalee workers and their allies will embark on a 5-day Build a New World March. And so the hope is that there'll be more information downstairs, but that we can write cards of encouragement as part of our support of the National Farm Workers Ministry. They're basically calling on retail food giants like Wendy's, Publix, and Kroger to join the Fair Food Program, a human rights initiative that many of their competitors joined over a decade ago. So just know that you can do that. We do have that every once in a while at Fellowship, where we can do some justice just by using our fingertips. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we will vary sometimes how we do our community prayers, and today, again, Reverend Lacey will be going around with the microphone. You can verbalize your prayer, but if you'd still like to write a prayer card out, Reverend Lacey will say your prayer, so I just want to let you know that. So they'll be a little bit different, so just keep that in mind as you're thinking about your prayers today. Just a reminder, too, that we have a companion guide for worship that you can pull up in your tidings if you haven't missed some of the journey and you want to look back. Also, a guide for our midweek Wednesday gatherings, which you're still invited to, that Reverend Lacey is leading. So with that, I invite you to take a deep breath, as deep as you can get it to be. And I'd like to invite the children forward for their time, or those who are like children or want to be children, right? Is that it? Lacey?
Yeah, anybody
who
young
wants
at
to
heart.
be a child today can come up.
High five. So Asha's going to help me lead. Oh, thank you, Deborah. All right. So Asha, do you know what season we're in right now? Winter. Do you know what church? Very good. Do you know what church season we're in? Do you remember? It's called Lent. And during this time, one of the things that we really focus on is different practices and ways that we can draw our attention to God. And just in our daily lives, how can we be more aware of God's presence in our life? And lots of communities do this in different ways. Reverend Laura is going to talk later about communities that have rhythms of prayer and ways that they mark their day. But I thought we could do a sensory practice to help us connect to our space around us and see how we experience God that way. Do you know how many senses we have? 5, yeah. Okay, everybody's invited into this. This is a practice for all of us. So I'll invite you first to just take a deep breath. And as you're able, you can look around and just notice to yourself, what are 5 things that you see? And you can just name them to yourself. And if you want to say them out loud, you can. Do you have 5 things? Okay. So just hold those things, and then let's all say, thank you. Thank you. So now, as you're able, notice 4 things that you can touch. You got your 4? Okay, so let's say thank you. Okay, now as you're able, notice 3 things that you can hear. Do you have 3 things? Yep. Okay. Let's say thank you. Now, as you're able, notice 2 things that you can smell. And I'll say, I really don't have any sense of smell. So this one is always challenging for me. two things? Okay. Let's say thank you. Thank you. And finally, one thing as you're able that you can taste. Got it? Yep. All right. Let's say thank you. Thank you. So this is a practice that we can all do at any time in the day. Maybe if you just need to slow down and remember where you are and what you're feeling, it just helps us with that. But it can help us connect to everybody who's around us and all the plants and just everything that's around us and how we experience God in that. And that's one of the ways that we can notice God in the rhythm of our daily life. So thank you for sharing that practice with me. So we're going to head off to Children's Church. So let's just take a moment to pray together. God, thank you for all of the ways that we can encounter you in our daily lives. Open our hearts to keep experiencing you in this place of worship and in Children's Church where we worship you as well. Bless us on our journey. And all of God's children said, Amen. Thank you.
Listen in the silence, listen in the noise, listen for the sound of the Spirit's voice. Listen in the silence, listen in the noise. Listen for the sound of the Spirit's voice.
As we have done over the last few weeks, as we've entered the journey of Lent, we're moving into our mini retreat time, what we're calling the entering the monastery of the heart. And really, our core practice during this season is listening, which doesn't sound like too hard of a practice, but to listen deeply, to listen in the noise and the silence and beneath the surface of what we see and hear, and kind of connect truly to what's really going on within us, what's going on in our world, and what's going on perhaps in other people, being able to see truth at a deeper level. And so each week we're focusing, you could say, I wanted to sort of reframe this for those of us who can't even remember what we ate for breakfast this morning, because we easily forget, but we really have been, and what we're doing is listening deeply to the stories of Jesus' life in the Gospels, listening in a different way. I'm not so much preaching about what we're reading, but you're listening in your own way. I'm inviting you to do that, and we'll do it in a little bit of a different way today. Today we're going to do a psalm, so that'll be a little different too. It's something Jesus prayed, but not his life per se. And we've also been listening to some of the wisdom from St. Benedict. And what we're kind of saying is that in a lot of ways there's an interconnection there, first of all because St. Benedict listened to the Gospels, and that's how he came up with his principles for life. But the other thing that is connecting is that both of the way that Jesus lived his life and his principles and practices were countercultural, and so was Benedict's for his time. And what does it mean for us to listen deeply so that we might find our own guiding principles and find ways to live in a countercultural way today? So ultimately, that's what we're doing. We've listened to Jesus in the desert. We've acknowledged that we're in our own desert in so many ways, tempted by so many things, right? Jesus, who remembers some of the temptations, I'll just say them: ego, right? Exertion of power. And then he's tempted up for these things, to these things, and then he sort of articulates a different way, right? His way is one that is a posture of humility, of service, not of overpowering people. His way is one of listening to the voice of the Spirit through the Scriptures, as opposed to all the other voices, really listening. And we also said, so he went into the desert, right? That's what Lent is sort of framed after. But then Benedict sort of did the same thing. He left Rome, and we're remembering that the Roman Empire was, just in a very place of corruption and injustice. And what I haven't brought out is remembering that Christianity had been co-opted by the Roman Empire by then. Very co-opted, so that the powerful were using Christianity. Remember Constantine, that was a little earlier, using Christianity basically for self-serving ends, right? Which every society can kind of get themselves caught in. So Benedict also sought a time of solitude, of inner listening, and came up with a rule of life, which we've talked about. That's not a rule like obey the rules, right? What is a rule? What can it be compared to? Does anybody remember from past? You can't answer. No, I'm just kidding around. Yes, Reverend Alexander has beautifully placed a rope around the sanctuary, because the sense of the word is that it marks out a path, so that we have that. And then we also have, you might have noticed these ropes, which I realize I forgot to mention the bead workshop, but we've got beads that we're adding every week, because a rule is also something that you can hold on to remind you of your path. And so the idea of this is that each week we're adding a bead. And we're going to have a bead workshop on March 26th with Tammy Nelson is going to lead us. She's a bead artist, but also she's a prayerful person. And we will take time that day to look at the different principles that we've been talking about and to make our own guideposts, our own guiding bracelets, our own something to hold on to or to hang, to remind us of some of the principles and practices that we actually want to put into practice, right? So that's why we have ropes around the sanctuary. We also have some trellises, because it also meant something to grow on, something that supports you as you grow. So there's a lot of reminders right now around the sanctuary of what that word actually means, that we're in this place of growing, that we're learning different principles that we want to internalize, that we're listening with the ear of the heart, which is at the very core of Benedictine life. The difference between listening here and the 12 inches, as they say, moving to the heart. And how does that change how we go about life? So I just wanted to remind you of some of those things. And each week we've added a new bead. Does anybody remember? Let me just remind us where we've been. Listening with the ear of the heart, and that sense of solitude or inner quieting is the white bead. Last week we talked about humility and listening in community, that it takes a sense of, in a sense, bowing and bending to other people to be able to be in community with one another. And we tried listening, a practice of listening with one another. And today we're introducing the green bead, which is listening to creation. And so I wanted to introduce, before we actually engage the scriptures, I take a little time to just introduce you to a little Benedictine wisdom. And so what we're adding today is the practice of what they call the liturgy of the hours. How many of you are familiar with this at all? You may not be, if you haven't gone to a liturgical church, which even if you do, a lot of lay people don't practice this. But it's a really kind of a neat practice. What it really is 7 sacred pauses during your day, which most of us will never get to, so we're not advocating that we're going to take 7. But the idea is you take 7 sacred pauses during the day to find times where you become more conscious of God's presence, much like what Reverend Lacey was saying, kind of coming in contact with where am I, how am I feeling, what am I connected to at this moment. And you may have heard the words, most of them are Latin. There's, the day begins in a monastic community and for Benedictines in general. If they get up in the middle of the night, most don't, but vigils begins in the middle of the night, 2 or 3 in the morning. Lauds, which is like sunrise, dawn, which is a time of gratitude and welcoming the light. Terce is morning, a time of promise and possibility, what we mostly live in, which is our work and our creativity time. Sext is noon, stopping in the middle of the day, as the light is at its highest point. It's a time to stop and realize this is my best time of the day, for most people anyway. This is where I probably have the most energy, the most focus, and then mid-afternoon we start to wind down, right? We start to kind of wax. There's the waxing and the waning. We're nearing the end of our workday, if we work 9 to 5, or the end of our volunteer time. And then there's Vespers. You probably have heard of that. Vespers is that kind of evening dusk time, probably one of my favorite times of the day, time to start to calm down, channel down, to shift from doing to being. And then Compline, which is kind of right before you go to sleep. So that's kind of the liturgy of the hours, and really what it is a liturgy of creation, because it's all about where the sun is. I mean, where the earth is rotating around the sun, right? So this morning, I was totally knocked off because the sun was in a different place, and I'm used to, and I just thought, well, that's just perfect, because it just, so rarely do we really notice that, because we go about our days, and sometimes the sun's not even out, but other times we're just so going that we don't even realize and watch that movement of the earth, really, and in our eyes, the sun. So this practice of praying 7 times a day originated with the Psalms. In the Psalms it says, let us pray 7 times a day. The reason is the Hebrew people prayed also that 7 times a day kind of mantra, kind of praying of the Psalms. Jesus prayed the Psalms. It was part of his worship. The Psalms were like their hymn book. And they prayed 7 times a day. And that's where the monastics picked that up. Now, just one other word before we actually have an experience with the Psalms. Of course, the Hebrews lived in an agrarian society, right? So it was very natural for them to incorporate creation into their prayers. I just want to read just a little quote for you. They were deeply in tune to the patterns of the seasons. They lived close to the sea and watched the ebb and flow of the tides. They watched the daily cycle of the sun and the changing paths of the moon. They brought their connection, says Esther DeWall, they brought their connection to the rhythms of creation into their prayer. She says, as a human being living on earth, we are part of the pattern of the day and night, the darkness and light, the waxing and waning of the moon, the rising and setting of the sun. However, as another person, a Benedictine contemporary abbess says, most of us live in the artificial rhythms ruled by the demands of the marketplace. We'll think about that for a second. The difference between the rhythms of creation and the rhythms of the marketplace. And so we're going to take some time now to kind of ponder that, in a sense, both to pray the Psalms together and to take them in. Because part of praying the Psalms, what's different about reading a psalm and praying a psalm, or chanting, which we're going to hear someone do later, is that you're entering into it whole body. It's allowing it to become part of you. It's kind of like a mantra. If any of you have ever done a mantra or a chant in any other, in the Buddhist tradition, they pray the Psalms, and it sort of gets you into this rhythm where you're able to sort of move into this other place. And the words start to become part of you, right? Jesus had the Psalms on the tip of his tongue all the time. He's always, saying phrases from the Psalms. The other thing about a psalm, if you could imagine these people gathering in the monastery, right? When you pray a psalm or chant one, even harder, you have to really listen to the other people. You have to kind of be in sync with them. And so it's a practice of learning how to be in community, which is what the choir does, right? That's what you do when they rehearse. They're learning to be in sync. Nobody's a soloist. Sometimes you pull somebody out, but you know what I mean. Same thing with hymns, right? Hopefully nobody's going, singing this loud. We're singing together. So it's a practice of how do we be in community together. And so we're going to have a chance. Carol's going to lead us in just a simple responsive reading of the psalm, but to think about it perhaps in a slightly different way as we do that. And then after that, Russell will chant the psalm, and we will simply respond with the one sentence response. It's a sung response. It's in your little, if you open up your insert. The first time around, we're just saying it with Carol, the bold. The second time around, Russell will chant the psalm, and we will do a sung response. So we just have a little sense of what it might be like to enter into a monastery setting or to do it ourselves at home. So let us, Carol will lead us in the psalm. Yes.
I invite you to listen for how the poetic verses of the Psalms reflect the rhythms of creation. The heavens are telling the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims God's handiwork. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night declares knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard. Yet their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In the heavens, God has set a tent for the sun, which comes out like a beloved from a wedding canopy. And like an athlete runs its course with joy, its rising is from the end of the heavens, and its circuit to the end of them, and nothing is hid from its heat. Yours is the day, yours also the night. You established the luminaries and the sun. You have fixed all the bounds of the earth. You made summer and winter. By awesome deeds you answer us with deliverance, O God of our salvation. You are the hope of all the ends of the earth and of the farthest seas. By your strength you established the mountains. You are girded with might. You silence the roaring of the seas, the roaring of the waves, the tumult of the peoples. Those who live at earth's farthest bounds are awed by your signs. You make the gateways of the morning and the evening shout for joy. You visit the earth and water it. You greatly enrich it. The river of God is full of water. You provide the people with grain, for so you have prepared it. You water its furrows abundantly and settle its ridges. You soften the earth with showers, and you bless its growth.
The heavens are telling the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims God's handiwork. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night declares knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard. And yet their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In the heavens God has sent a tent for the sun, which comes out like a beloved from a wedding canopy, and like an athlete runs its course with joy. Its rising is from the end of the heavens, and its circuit to the end of them, and nothing is hid from its heat. God is the hope of all the ends of the earth. Yours is the day, yours also the night. You established the luminaries and the sun. You have fixed all the bounds of the earth. You made summer and winter. By awesome deeds you answer with deliverance, O God of our salvation. You are the hope of all the ends of the earth, and of the farthest of seas. By your strength you established the mountains. You are girded with might. You silence the roaring of the seas, the roaring of their waves, the tumult of the peoples. God is the hope of all the ends of the earth. Those who live at earth's farthest bounds are awed by your signs. You make the gateways of the morning and the evening shout for joy. You visit the earth and water it. You greatly enrich it. The river of God is full of water. You provide the people with grain, for so you have prepared it. You water its furrows abundantly and settle its ridges. You soften the earth with showers, and you bless its growth. God is the hope of all the ends of the earth.
Often after a psalm is read, there's a period of silence, a time of meditation. This morning, I'm going to invite you to a time, it's not necessarily going to be in silence, we're going to hear some chants in the background, some music, but a time, once again, either to stay in your seats, or if it's helpful for you to walk, because using our body, whether it be chanting or walking, for some people can help allow that meditation process to flow. Other people need stillness, and so noticing what you need. I've offered you some prompt questions that I'm going to just read out loud. And so the idea is you could take your insert with you. You can, if you feel led to a particular question, stay there. If you want to go through all of them, feel free to do that. So the first invitation is to go back to the psalm that we just heard and to notice what you heard. What did you hear about the Hebrew people's connection and your connection to the rhythm of creation? Was there any wisdom that spoke to you? The next question is really taking some time to look at our world and the lifestyles that we do lead and what makes it difficult for us to tune into the rhythms of creation. Day and night, winter and spring, ebb and flow, waxing and waning, fallowness and fruitfulness, resting and creating and working. So you might take time if that is something you want to meditate more on. Some people like to scribble and write, so if there's some of you who'd like to do that, or perhaps later if you do something else, then just take some time to imagine your daily life, just one day, an average day, and put the time you wake up as a dot and the time you go to sleep generally, and just kind of take your pen and notice in a straight line where you take restful moments, and in a kind of zigzag line where you're busy and active. Just notice that. Notice if there's places where maybe another couple of sacred pauses in your day, just a time to recalibrate whatever you understand as prayer for yourself. Could be deep breathing, could be reading scripture, could be listening to music, but a way to pause and recalibrate. So, for instance, when I look at my life, quite honestly, I'm really good in the morning. I take some time, and in the evening. But once I get here to church, my day's like this. And often I forget that couple of resting moments in the middle of my day. So I confess that to you, because I'm working on this too, so that you might just take some time to just notice what your days are like. And then as you move into the completion of the meditation, at some point, to ask yourself, what are a few of those places in my life that I can take, or times of my day, I should say, that I can take an intentional pause? What times would those be? What would I do to nurture my heart, soul, mind, and strength? And so we'll take we'll take as long as you need, and depending on, but we're going to play some music. Again, you're invited to stay in your seat, to jot things down. If you want to walk around, take a pen. There should be pens out there. I think whoever the usher was had pens. And just take some time to reflect on the question that you feel led to reflect on. Yeah. Since we are a smaller group today, I'm going to invite us as a community, if you feel led, to share something that you noticed about the psalm, whether how it was done and how it affected you, or, well, why don't we start with that? Anything that you noticed about praying or hearing the psalm chanted. Yes, Tana?
The feeling with the rhythms of nature.
The rhythms, feeling that rhythm with nature. Mm-hmm. Anybody else? So Eric said just that as Russell offered up his voice, it's like a pronouncement, like, this is part of it is so. Sort of almost, my experience always is sort of the sense of, you've only listened to it once, but the sense of communion with nature, with the mystery, that there's a conversation going on. And the Psalms invite us into that conversation. If we don't have the words, sometimes that was the feeling, is that if we don't have the words, we can enter into these words and let them enter us. Any wisdom that you notice from the Psalms about the wisdom gleaned from creation? Mm-hmm.
The rhythms of day and night, we don't hear them, but they exist in our lives, and they function in a particular way to order all of our existence.
I should have had the mic with me on that one. That was really profound in terms of, but the sense of day-to-day pours forth speech night to night. And Sophia is saying that this is really, that rhythm is always going on. It's whether we notice it and whether we hear it. And the psalm actually talks about how we don't hear it, that their voice is not heard. And thinking about the connections to our world. So this is not just about meditating on it for ourselves, but think about what that means. Are we listening to creation right now? How are we not listening? How is she crying out to us? How are we working her so hard that she has no breath, no air, no clean water? And we are working because we are part of creation, right? And that is that sense that we are part, that was the sense, of pagan faith and the Hebrew faith and any agricultural rooted faith, Celtic Christianity, that we remember our connection to the earth. Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah.
No.
Go ahead.
No.
Yeah.
I just was behind you. So
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
You led right into what I was going to say, which is the line, those who live at earth's farthest bounds are awed by your signs. Everybody living on this earth experiences the cycles of this earth, unless you're in prison and can't see anything. But I guess it's the universality of that line that calls me a little bit. Here we are in the Christian Old Testament Psalms, but it's a universal statement, and I liked that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that is sort of the spirit of Christianity practiced the way Jesus did, is that there is a connection. That's what humility really, that sense of humility, of realizing our place in the universe. We are not God, right? We are connected to all beings. We're not meant to dominate. We're meant to serve. We saw Jesus washing the disciples' feet. We're meant to serve other people, to pour out our lives, to bless other people, to bless the earth. Well, I invite you as we continue on this journey to take this home, to think about that line of your life or your daily practice, and to continue to consider, do I want to integrate some sacred pauses, some times in nature, because we didn't even get to that point. That's part of the pause, can be just going outside. And taking time to really hear the birds are starting to chirp and the little buds are starting, to really experience that, and to allow it to recalibrate us. Sometimes even just a few minutes of doing that can completely recalibrate us for our days. And so, thank you for sharing. Continue to reflect. As we walk this Lenten journey, we'll continue to kind of add practices and principles to our life of faith. And so we'll kind of move out of our mini retreat by singing once again, "Listen in the Silence, Listen in the Noise." It's up at the front of your bulletin.
Listen in the silence, listen in the noise, listen for the sound of the Spirit's voice. Listen in the silence, listen in the noise. Listen for the sound of the Spirit's voice.
As Reverend Laura shared, prayer is an invitation to bring into our daily life the rhythm of connection. And so as we enter into this time of community prayer, I will bring the mic around for anybody who wants to lift a prayer. And then I invite you to, if that's a prayer that you can hold this week, to simply just raise your hand. And that can be a practice, one of those moments that you noticed where you can pause each day throughout your week. You can bring these prayers into that space with you, and we'll continue to build our rhythm of connection with one another. And if you offered a prayer card, I can also read those out loud, unless you would like to lift it aloud. So let us take a deep breath. Entering into the rhythm of this beloved community. Connecting our prayers to one another and to this whole world, to all of God's creation. Holy One, we lift to you now the prayers of this beloved community. What prayers do we want to offer this day?
I ask that my daughter and granddaughter and I continue to thrive and to hear God's call and God's love.
Who could hold this prayer this week? Let us say together, God, in your mercy, hear our prayers.
I'd like to offer a prayer or ask for a prayer for my friend Lefcadio Cortese, whose death a year ago tomorrow has shaken the activism world in the Rainforest Action Network and in Greenpeace, where he worked and was so effective in his campaigns to save Borneo rainforests and Papua New Guinea rainforests and Indonesian Sumatra rainforests. And I pray for the trees that have lost their voice in those places.
And who can hold this prayer in our rainforests and those who fight for it? God, in your mercy, hear our prayers.
I asked for a prayer for my sons. One is emotionally far and the other one is physically far. So I pray for them.
Who can hold this prayer today and in the week? God, in your mercy, hear our prayers.
So I ask your prayers for healing for my husband David, who's at Highland today getting help with an illness. And I ask your prayers for a friend in Mississippi who is in hospice care. Her name is Tony Van Crete. And for her husband, Paul, and son James. Thank you.
Who can hold David and Tony and Mary Ellen in prayers this week? God, in your mercy, hear our prayers. We lift up a prayer for Alexandra's aunt, Marlene, who fell and injured her neck. Who can hold Marlene and family in prayers this week? God, in your mercy, hear our prayers. We ask for prayers for friends Kathy and Randy who are struggling with health issues, for a friend Jerry who was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and prayers for a friend Kara for wisdom. Who can hold these dear ones in prayer this week? God, in your mercy. And we lift up prayers of gratitude this day, prayers of deep thanksgiving for God's opening doors, for housing for neighbor friends who have been struggling with finding a place they can afford and fits their needs. Who can hold this gratitude? God, in your grace, hear our prayers. And Jeannie lifts a prayer of gratitude for that so far this community has not been impacted by major floods and washouts. Who can hold this gratitude and hope? God, in your grace, hear our prayers. And Deborah lifts a prayer of gratitude for her sister who was discharged from the hospital. And please continue prayers for her mother who was transferred to the ICU. Who can hold Deborah and family in prayers this week? God, in your grace, hear our prayers. Holy One, we lift up all of these prayers to you, connecting our hearts to each other, to our wider community. We hold also in prayer our sister church in Loomis and those who are being impacted by homophobia and transphobia in that community as drag shows are being banned. Help us to continue to be your witness in this world. God, in your mercy, hear our prayers. And we ask for continued prayers for all of our communities who are being impacted by climate. Help us to show up and care for one another and to more deeply tend to our relationship with this earth so that we can enter into right relationship with all of creation. God, in your mercy, hear our prayers. And we lift up all of these prayers to you and those that remain deep in our hearts, knowing that we are connected to you. As we say together the prayer that your beloved Jesus taught us to pray. Our Creator, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts. Forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Another way that we are invited into a new rhythm is through our offering. This is a new rhythm with the resources and the gifts that we each have. And this Lent, we are taking up an offering for the Black Wealth Builders Fund. This is a reparations project that was first started by Arlington Community Church that helps Black families gain access to housing, especially in the Bay Area, where housing is so expensive and where the disparity in who can have housing is so great. This is an opportunity for us to help create a different world. So please let us give as we are able to this offering. extend a hand in blessing. Holy One, all that we are is a gift from you. May these gifts that we have offered this day and the gift of each moment of our life be a blessing to you and join in the rhythm of creating your kingdom on earth where all creation may flourish. May it be so. Amen.
I invite you to join me in our parting blessing. Let us go paying attention to how God's love shows us the way of life. Let us set out on this way with the gospel as our guide. Friends, let us go forth, walking into this day, noticing, rejoicing, offering gratitude, and blessing others in peace. Amen.
Amen.